Welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing and That's Badass Wood Art. Remember, you can head on over to that'sbadasswoodart.com for 20% off any one item on their store by using promo code CT Pocket. Well, guys, the news officially broke this morning. The Vikings are parting ways with longtime wide receiver, hometown kid, by the way, Adam Thielen, who was fourth all time in Minnesota Vikings history for receiving yards. But obviously, it's a new era for the Minnesota Vikings. Last year was a fun ride, but some tough decisions had to be made. We saw it with Eric Kendricks earlier, and now with Adam Thielen. So Miles, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts with this move?
Well, as probably the last person to lock down Adam Thielen in the state of Minnesota from high school, no, it's one of those things. Like we were just talking before the show. It's as a Adam Thielen's one of those players over the last decade that was a fan favorite. Obviously, hometown kid. He's
Yeah.
someone that you root for. He was like me and him are the same age, and we played against each other high school, college. Like it's just one of those things. Like I run into him at my local Costco. Like those types of things. Like it's one of like he's part of this community, right? Like he's a part of like Minnesota history. And so like that's the part that really to me like it sucks like just to see that go. Like from a business perspective, it makes all the sense in the world. Like
Yeah.
he's going to be 33. He kind of looks like he lost his step. His like feature in the offense is diminishing. Like those types of things. Like from a business standpoint, it makes sense. But from like a fan, Minnesota native standpoint, it sucks. Like he's a huge part of the community, and so like those things. Obviously, he's not going to like stop being a huge part of the community, but it's just going to be different now. Like fans, like young fans, grew up with Adam Thielen as like their might have possibly their favorite player, and those things. Like it's just one of those things. Like it sucks, and as like the Vikings, the wide receiver position's a position where the Vikings have had a lot of great receivers, and Adam Thielen's been able to like etch himself into that group, especially after being an undrafted kid who was just part of like he wasn't even invited to training camp. He was a trial candidate during rookie minicamp. Like all these things like that we've all heard a million times, but it's still a really cool that we got to kind of see that, and so him like really rise up through the ranks and become a solidified, really good top end wide receiver. So sucks to see him go, but also like excited to see where he goes next.
Yeah, and it's funny to kind of see some of these comments, because obviously, yeah, Mary when she comments here, everything he did on and off the field, like we felt like he was one of our own while he was here, and it was really easy to root for him. I will miss saying the hooked on a Thielen saying from now on, so we'll have to come up with some new ones as the new era kind of ushers in. But Ryan, what are you thinking with this release today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously bittersweet, right? Just in the sense that you don't want to see a guy like that go. Hometown kid. You wish that he would have been able to retire a Viking, but I do think he still has some left in the tank. And unfortunately, just the contract didn't match what we could really make plausible right now. So hopefully, I think I tweeted this out maybe yesterday that hopefully he has an opportunity to go to a contender, somebody who he can still help contribute in a very positive way. I had mentioned the Kansas City Chiefs are going to likely be in the market for a receiver of his talent with Juju Smith-Schuster leaving. Also, the Buffalo Bills, another contender that potentially could reunite him and Stephon Diggs and have that opportunity for that bromance to rekindle. And again, it's not like they're not in need of a receiver as well, especially more of that kind of crafty slot possession type receiver that Thielen has kind of come to become over the last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, obviously it stings from that perspective as well of losing the hometown kid and not being able to continue to. I guess you can still root for him from afar, but
Yeah.
for your team to contribute to that. But
Yeah.
I said in the tweet yesterday as well, he got to live out the dream, right? Your hometown kid got to play for the hometown team, played your prime years for that team. I mean, you're not going to get much better experience in that in the NFL.
Couple fantastic runs too. I mean,
Oh yeah.
when you think of the games that he got to play in, like he's going to remember those forever. Before we get to Ryan's question here, Ryan in the chat,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read one statement quick. We can read a couple of them, but Kevin O'Connell released a statement on Adam's release, and he just said, for over a decade, Adam honed his craft to become one of the most well-recognized wide receivers in the NFL. Over that same time, he poured so much of his time into his home state, which made it even more special for him to earn our 2022 Walter Payton Man of the Year nomination. I personally leaned on Adam for his work ethic, leadership, and counsel multiple times to get our team where we wanted it to be last season. I appreciate Adam's contributions and will be pulling for his continued success for him, Caitlin, and their children. So Ryan brings up a good point. I don't know if we know at the current moment, but I know, Miles, you made a tweet about it. Post June 1st designation, I know that technically saves the Vikings a little bit of cap space, but do we know if that actually came to fruition?
We don't. My guess is it's not going to be, mainly because of the timing. I feel like if they really wanted to post June 1, they would have waited and kind of let this negotiation linger, because then they could make that decision. But it seems like they're making this move so that they can have money for next week. And I hope that's the case. I don't want to do a post June 1, more so because you want to keep that long-term flexibility. I think you want, like, if the Vikings are planning on quote unquote reset this year, moving guys like Eric Hendricks and Adam Thielen, like those core foundational pieces over the last few years, eating that on the chin now is better than like spreading that money out, because that's just like adding a void year to Adam Thielen's deal. And that would just make it like, so you would cut that money in half. So you'd save more this year, but you wouldn't get that money until June 2nd anyways. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that just type of move, the Vikings need the cap space now. And they also want to be able to make moves next week to add a couple pieces. And so, yes, it may not be as much savings, and more dead cap, but at the same time, you keep your flexibility. And I think it just allows you to make more now moves than it would if you were to wait. And so I don't think that it should be, and I hope it's not. But obviously we don't know the full details. I would assume though it's a straight cut, now, and so that they can have that money for next week.
Yeah.
Well, one question I do have, and I don't know if either of you have knowledge of how this works, but if it is a post June 1st cut, are they still able to negotiate and strike a deal with the team, or do you have to wait till then?
Oh wait, Adam can.
Adam can. Okay.
So Adam becomes a free agent no matter what. Like, he's an immediate free agent no matter what happens, whether it's post June 1 or not. But the Vikings don't get that cap savings or the cap relief until June.
That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it never hinders the player. It's always the team.
Yeah. Hold on one second. I'm trying to pull something up here.
Well, real quick, let's talk about like Adam's impact on like the offense. So like we saw last year specifically, because as Justin Jefferson shifted into like that primary wide receiver one role, especially in the Kevin O'Connell offense where he's the primary slot receiver and he's also the primary like move receiver. Adam Thielen was kind of fixed as the X receiver in the offense, where he was the outside guy, constantly being asked to like be a downfield threat and those things. And it's not that Thielen wasn't in his heyday. Adam Thielen was one of the better deep threats in the league. In this current offense, though, that's not where his skill set is. And I think, Ryan, you mentioned he could go somewhere and be a slot receiver. I think that'd probably be where Adam Thielen would ideally go, is a team that could use a slot receiver and someone that allow him to be that inside receiver, not having and to win option routes in those things and be a possession receiver, especially in the twilight of his career. And so I'm excited to see him get to go do that, hopefully, because he wasn't going to get that opportunity here. And I think from both ends, from Adam's side and the Vikings side, the Vikings need to find somebody to help stretch the field a little bit more and be a true downfield threat, which Thielen isn't really that anymore. And Thielen wants to go somewhere where he can go be a little bit more of a slot receiver, focal point of the offense. And so I think from both sides, it just makes a lot more sense to like make that move now.
I mean, it was a little unfortunate, right? His role and KJ Osborne's role became redundant. They're very similar receiver skill sets. And when you have JJ doing one thing, which in all actuality is kind of what they do as well, right? I mean, he's a little bit more versatile and can do a bit more, but we have a very redundant skill set. So to add a deep threat, to your point, Miles, is going to be very important for this team going forward, especially now that Adam's gone.
So let's talk about that a little bit, though, because obviously you said that KJ and Adam Thielen's roles were a little bit redundant, but now the wide receiver room is looking pretty bare when you think. I mean, it depends on what your opinion of KJ Osborne, right? Like, do you think he can be a true wide receiver too, or do you think his ceiling is, you know, top end wide receiver 3? And then, I mean, limited draft capital. What do you guys how do you approach next week with free agency and then also into the draft to hopefully bolster up this offense that needs weapons?
Well, that's one thing. Oh, Ryan, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, bud. You're good.
I was just gonna say I tweeted out yesterday just kind of that same thing. Like the wide receiver position as a whole. I should say that I'm gonna preface it like whether Thielen was gonna be here or not, but now that he's officially gone, it's a major need. It's not just like the Vikings could use another receiver to no. Like they need to add to that group. Not just for this year, but as I mentioned in my tweet, KJ Osborne and Jalen Reagor are both up pending free agents. Justin Jefferson doesn't count because they're going to pick up his 5th-year option, and Justin Jefferson's going to be here for the next however many years. Like, so I don't include him, even though technically, as of right now, he's heading into his 4th year too. But they're going to pick up that 5th-year option, blah blah blah. So I'm not counting him. But KJ Osborne, Jalen Reagor, both impending free agents as of right now. Don't anticipate extensions for either guy. I mean, that could change for KJ Osborne, but we don't know. So the Vikings need to plan. So Jalen Naylor and Justin Jefferson are technically the only guys on the 53-man roster. I'm not really including practice squad guys on the 53-man roster that are under contract for 2024 and beyond. So they really need to find some running mates for Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
And so I think that includes both the draft and free agency. I think they need to go find a mid-tier wide receiver. I think Darius Slayton. Obviously, I think DJ Chark is like the top end of the free agent list, but I think he's gonna be expensive. Not that I wouldn't spend the money on him. I just don't know if the Vikings are gonna have the money to spend on him. But like a Darius Slayton to me would be a perfect fit in like that role of asking him to be a deep threat, a guy that can win on slants as well, win on some of those like quick routes, but also the downfield threat and help stretch the field. And he can win down there, but I don't think he's someone that's going to break the bank. Someone you could sign for like 2 years, $8 million, that type of deal, like something reasonable. That type of deal I think would be really good. And then you go into the draft and you try to find somebody, whether it's with your pick at 23 or you trade back and find somebody in late day 1 or on day 2. Like those types of things, I think the Vikings just need to be creative in how they do it, but they definitely need to add to the room.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in both fashions, right? I don't want to see the bargain bin wide receiver hopping that we've typically done in the past with like Albert Wilson or whatever. Like to your point, yeah, like Darius Slayton should kind of be the floor of what we need to go and grab in free agency. The issue is we tried to address this early on last year, right?
Yep.
We tried to get ahead of the curve here with the Jalen Reagor trade, and unfortunately, at least as of last year, that didn't really pan out. That isn't, proving to be a really, really good signing for us or trade for us. So unless he can really turn it around this year and show in the offseason programs that he has the ability to kind of be that dude. And again, we didn't see enough of Naylor to say, hey, we completely trust you to take over a top 3, top 4 spot. We're kind of in a spot where we need to go and add in both. And ideally, yeah, like you said, Miles, go grab a Darius Slayton type, or Mecole Hardman. You'll probably get paid too much, but that type of guy. And then go grab a guy early on in the draft or in the mid rounds. I mean, I was talking to Thor on Twitter yesterday about, obviously we should probably highly consider a receiver in the first round, whether it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, if it's Zay Flowers, if it's Quentin Johnston, whoever, right?
For sure.
But if like for whatever reason, if the Vikings are just enamored with a Joey Porter Jr. or a Deonte Banks or a Nolan Smith, if he's there at edge, depending on what we do with Za'Darius Smith here in the next couple of days, then there's some decent mid-round guys. I mean, obviously I'm going to advocate for Marvin Mims because he's exactly what we need when we're talking about that speed on the outside.
Yeah.
But you have guys like Cedric Tillman. You have guys like your
I
boy
think he'd be a good fit.
Jonathan Mingo, right? Like
Yeah.
there's some good mid-round guys that you could go grab that can contribute, I think, early on and provide this team with what they need.
Yep.
Well, and what they can be in the offense too. And I think that's why I don't like to guys shouldn't be sit at one position, but I think it's so important to have guys that have different skill sets too. We always talk about the Vikings now need to get a wide receiver too. I think they need to get a running mate with Justin Jefferson that has wide receiver one potential and upside.
Yep.
For so long we've been spoiled with the Diggs Thielen and then the JJ Thielen. And so those guys are 1A, 1B with each other. They don't need to go get a wide receiver two. They need to go get a guy that can be a wide receiver one. You just happen to have the other best receiver in the league. So that just makes them an amazing duo, right? So
one thing here, we got another question from Cliff here. Did they post the June 1st designate on him late to the party? Well, Ben Gessling just came out a second ago, and his release is a pre-June 1st move. So the Vikings are going to get about $6.41 million in cap space and then absorb about $13.5 million in dead cap this year. So I want to get your thoughts quick on just how Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell, more so Kwesi because he's doing the roster construction, but in collaboration with Kevin O'Connell, just how they're just taking the hit this year. Almost, it seems like they're ready to, eat this dead cap so they can have a fresh slate for the future. But what are your thoughts on kind of what we've heard about the offseason thus far? The couple of moves we've seen. I saw Jeremy Fowler from ESPN say that the Vikings were going to be aggressive in free agency. So there's just a lot of moving parts here, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on just, the path forward to this new era of Vikings football.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously we're letting go of some legacy guys, right? But I don't think people need to equate that with we're just giving up and throwing in this season, right? Because when you look at Kendricks, obviously we all love Kendricks, and especially you, Matt. I know that you're a big fan.
That's my guy.
But his production's replaceable. Yeah. Adam Thielen's production is replaceable. If we do move on from Za'Darius Smith, now that first half of the season production, it's going to be pretty hard to replace. But the second half, he was still very productive. I know the sack numbers didn't come in, but he was still getting pressures at a high rate and all that. He's going to be a hard one to replace if we do move on from him. But these guys are replaceable. Mm-hmm. They're not Justin Jeffersons. They're not Kirk Cousins to even that extent, right? So what I think we're really doing is trying to get younger and trying to put ourselves in position for that. Again, going back to that competitive rebuild, get ourselves some capital now, go get hopefully a younger team that has more flexibility in the future for us to then go and make moves in the future if we need to, primarily probably at the quarterback position in the next couple of years, given the fact that Kirk Cousins is 35. So,
yeah. I think so. For me, I think this is Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell really getting to put their stamp on the Vikings roster. Last year, it really felt like it was we need to prove that Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman were the problem, not the players. So let's see what we can do with a revamped front office, revamped coaching staff, and see how they play with that same personnel. This is now Kwesi and KOC getting to put that stamp on it, and so they're making that decision of, hey, we can no longer, and I think Kwesi kind of hinted at it during the combine, but you need to be a sustainable winner. You can't just be a flash in the pan every other year type, which we did see under the Zimmer Spielman regime, was they were winning every other year and then just trying to reload, every other year. And so the plan hopefully is to reset your cap a little bit, get more cap flexibility for the long term, with making sure you're not giving bad long-term deals to aging veterans. Like Kwesi didn't give Harrison Smith that long-term extension. Rick Spielman did. He gave Adam Thielen the one last year, but that was more so because I kind of think he had to. Mm-hmm. They gave Kirk Cousins the 1-year extension, not anything beyond it, because they knew they needed that flexibility. And so this allows them to kind of reset that roster a little bit, reset their cap situation, knowing that guys like Justin Jefferson, Chris Ajarasat, TJ Hawkins, those guys are going to get paid, but also they know that they need to bring in new blood into the system and into the building. And that's being able to spend in free agency, not just bottom of the barrel guys in free agency, but actually being able to get into the heart of where the best parts of free agency are, which is to me the middle tier, the guys that you can get that are contributors that don't break the bank, but they're guys that they're better than the bottom of the barrel. They're that middle ground, right? Those tend to be the best, what's the word I'm looking for? The best values. And so I think this is them doing that. And I think Kwesi and O'Connell, and Kwesi specifically, who's a guy who was only signed a 4-year deal when he first became the GM. He's going into year 2. That 4 years comes quick. He needs to build a sustainable winner. So if they have to take a small step back in 2023, but that helps them be sustainable in 24, 25 and beyond, that's a better move than, hey, let's just kind of run it back and keep pushing that money down the road. So I think that's where they're going. And so to me, that means guys like Patrick Peterson probably shouldn't come back, that unless it's a super cheap deal. There's no need to bring some of those guys back, because if you're phasing out the other ones, don't bring back the current ones. And so I'm excited to see where the roster goes. Ryan, you hit the nail on the head. The quarterback's obviously going to be the biggest one. And I think we've heard the adage saying of front office gets to dictate 52 players on the roster, and then ownership dictates the one, which is the quarterback. So that's the one caveat we still don't know, what happens at quarterback. But everything else, it feels like Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi kind of are getting to put their stamp on where the roster is going to continue to go.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like they're done either, right? Because yesterday, if you heard Darren Wolfson on Score North, apparently there's a trade offer on the table for Dalvin Cook. We've all heard about that. We heard about the Zadarius Smith stuff yesterday when he essentially asked for his release, and the Vikings say no, because he's on a pretty cheap deal considering the productivity you're going to get from a guy like him. Seeing a lot of the same stuff in the chat here about it's sad that this day is finally here. NFL goes quick, man. That's why these players want to maximize their value. That's why guys like Zadarius Smith want out, so they can go hit that market one more time and get paid. But the Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell really are, to Miles' point, trying to make their stamp on this roster. Last year, they played with Rick Spielman's roster. This year, they want to play with their own. And so there might be some bumps in the road, but by God, they're going to do it. Ryan, you had a quick comment.
Well, I was going to say is we're talking quarterback comments here, and you looking at the comments in the chat here, it looks like a lot of people are ready to move on from the quarterback position. And again, it's funny the fact that this fan base is so split on Kirk Cousins, and we're some of the only people I feel like that are maybe squarely in the middle of that.
I wouldn't even say they're split, right? I think everybody acknowledges that Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, right? But
yeah. I mean, Twitter is Twitter. I mean, if you look at it from the Twitter perspective, I mean, sure, they can say he's fine quarterback, but half the fan base wants him out now. Half of them want us to extend him for the rest of his career. Half of us, and then there's a small fraction that maybe say a small 1-year extension. It's just so all over.
Can we touch on that real quick, guys? Just more so. I kind of tweeted this yesterday as well, but it's more of for ever since the Vikings signed Kirk Cousins to a 3-year, $84 million fully guaranteed deal, Kirk Cousins has had all of the leverage essentially with the Vikings. The Vikings giving Kirk a 1-year extension last year, and then kind of at least up to right now, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 days or whatever but something or nothing is going to happen with Kirk Cousins over the next handful of days. The Vikings it feels like they're finally kind of getting that leverage back, because the longer they wait on a Kirk extension, the less valuable Kirk becomes. And that's good for the team. And I mean that in I mean that from a contract extension negotiation standpoint. If the Vikings just said, hey, Kirk, we're going to play it out. Let's let you play out in your final year of your deal. And then they still wanted to try to re-sign him next year, they could, because his numbers aren't going to go up from a cap standpoint. He's not as any new extension, that number is going to start going down, because his value is going to start decreasing, because he's 35. He'll be 36 next offseason. So that number just depreciates because his value depreciates just like naturally. And Tom Brady's that complete outlier player that like can play into his mid 40s and stuff, right? But like you don't see that from other guys. It's a very rare thing, and it becomes a sunk cost at a certain point. And the Vikings don't want to put themselves into that Matt Ryan situation where, hey, let's go give him as much money as we can, even though he's 35, because we think he's got years left. You never know when that drop-off's going to hit. And the Vikings playing it with a little bit more hesitation is a smart move. And I'm fully on board. Like, if they don't want to touch Kirk's deal at all, and they just let's say, hey, we're going to let this year be a reset. Well, you play it out however you want to. And if Kirk, then let Kirk make the decision from there. If Kirk then wants to explore a trade, then you work with them to explore a trade. If Kirk's like, cool, I'm okay, like playing it out, then you play it out. Like, I don't think you need to rush yourself into making any rash decision. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to find a future quarterback, but I don't think with Kirk you have to make a rash decision.
Well, Kirk is no dummy either, right? Like, Kirk can kind of start to see the writing on the wall here in Minnesota that things are changing, right? And this is not the previous regime that he worked with. And, you know, again, I've been hounding this. I feel like it's the buzzword, but it is a new era, and the Vikings are likely going to move on from Kirk in some form in the next year or so. And just a shameless plug here, Judd Zulgad wrote an article just about maybe the Vikings should let the Kirk Cousins contract just play out this year. No extension, don't touch it, and you guys can each, go your separate ways. A couple things want to get to here before we kind of round out the show. Chuck asked if KJ Osborne becomes wide receiver 2. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the show, so if you want to go back and check that out, you can. We got some names here for draft prospects. Hyatt or Addison would be great to pair with Jefferson. I love Jordan Addison. I think that would be a phenomenal tandem for the next decade.
I'm a legit pass on Hyatt, though, by the way.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that, by the way, in the future weeks here when we get to draft prospects and so on and so forth. So before we transition to this last thing, I want to talk about any final thoughts on the Vikings moving on from Adam Thielen.
Yeah, again, just bittersweet, like I had mentioned earlier. I hope he does keep the Thielen football camp that he does. I think he does it actually up in North Dakota and in Woodbury around, just because my kid has gone to it the last couple of years and absolutely loves it. I got a couple of videos of him catching passes from Adam, which is pretty fun. So, all the best to him and his family, and hope that they find success in their next stop. So,
yes. The last thing that I wanted to talk about before we close this show, not really Adam Thielen related, but it was Vikings news this morning. And I know Miles kind of wanted to touch on it as well. I'm trying to pull up the exact amount, but Ross Blacklock agreed to a contract negotiation, restructure, whatever, to the NFL veteran minimum of $1 million for 23, which clears about $700,000 of cap space. Miles, there was something you wanted to say about that, so I'll give you the floor here.
Well, so of course, like that hit before the Thielen one, and of course, fans are like, "What the heck? Like, why is like people always seem to care about the order of operations, which is funny to me." But like this move for the Vikings is, hey, we're either going to release you or you take the pay cut, that type of thing. Because the one thing that and if you're Blacklock, the season he had last year, I don't think he's signing anywhere else for a veteran, anything more than a veteran minimum deal anyway. So it's, hey, just take the veteran minimum deal in Minnesota and kind of guarantee yourself a place here and not have to hit free agency, or, go risk finding the open market and getting the same deal, but you have to go then prove yourself elsewhere.
He has incentives on this deal to earn kind of what he lost. I thought that's
does he? Okay, I missed that.
Which he probably wouldn't get elsewhere. Yeah. Yep.
That's even better. So if he can re-earn some of that money back through just playing well, that's great. And then he can go reprove himself this year and hit the open market next year. I think it's just it's a win-win for both sides in that the Vikings get to keep a depth piece that they traded for last year at a cheaper cost, and then Blacklock can get some of that money back and also just reprove and continue to prove himself in the Viking system if he can.
Absolutely.
And this new system should fit his skill set a little bit better than the last one. So, I mean, we'll
Hopefully.
see. We'll
Yeah.
see. But
Well, I want to thank everybody who joined us today. It's been a while since we did a live show, and we picked up right where we left off, by the way. So kudos to you guys, but thank you to everybody in the chat, firing off the comments. Climb in the Pocket has a whole lot in store for you. There's probably going to be some more news. So whether it's our group, Tyler and Dave hopping on to do something live to break down reactions to Vikings news, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you know when we go live and get caught up with all that information. To Adam Thielen, the third all time in Minnesota Vikings history in receiving touchdowns, fourth all time in yards. It's been a pleasure to watch you over these, I can't even remember, 10 years, 8 years. And we all hope the best for you at your next adventure. So until next time, everybody, Skol Vikings.